Hi everyone, thank you so much for making the effort to join us here this evening. I know it's a really tricky time of night to come and join an online presentation. You've got a heap going on in the background, no doubt. But it speaks volumes about how committed you are to your children, that you really wanted to see them have the most settled start to the year as you can. For those who've not met me before, I'm Dr. Kaylene Henderson. I'm a Gold Coast-based child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I'm a member of the Australian Association for Infant Mental Health, which is working with 0 to 3s in particular. And my work now primarily is working with parents and educators, because ultimately you guys are the ones who can make the most amount of difference in children's lives. So I often present seminars and webinars like this, and I'm a very proud partner of Only About Children as part of their Grow With Us parenting series. And you'll find a bunch of my previous webinars online on your through Only About Children if you'd like to tap into those if you weren't able to join me last year or if you're new to the service. But tonight, this is the topic that we're going to talk about: settling into childcare and or transitioning rooms. So I'm going to be talking fairly broadly about this topic, knowing that you have children ranging from 0 to 5, perhaps 6 years old, who are all at various points in their childcare journey, whether it's at the start or moving rooms at the age of 4 perhaps. I'm going to try and make it as broad and as helpful as possible. And at the end, there'll be time for questions. So what we'll do is I'll flag about 95% of the way through my presentation when it's time to start popping some questions in the question box, and then we'll leave about 20 minutes at the end of the hour to address as many of those questions as I can. Okay. Before we start looking specifically at how we can settle our children into childcare for the first time or to their new room, if that's the case for your little one, I firstly just wanted to touch upon the topic of temperament. Those of you who've heard me speak before might have heard me speak about temperament before, but I think it's just such a helpful concept for us all to know about. The reality is, all of you will have discovered by now that having children is a bit like lucky dip. You truly get no say in who you get. And part of that relates to temperament. Temperament refers to those biologically hardwired personality traits that your child is born with, that you see played out day in, day out. Very much influences who they are in the world, how they see themselves. An example of temperament is how physically active your child is. Some of you are born with those human Energizer bunnies, and on the flip side, some of you are born with those children who, like one of my children tried to tell me once, she was allergic to walking. That's not a thing, but you get the idea. Some children are really active, some children less so, and prefer those really more sedentary activities like craft, having a look at books, puzzles, that sort of thing. The reason I mention temperament is because there are a couple of temperament traits that can really influence how easily a child settles into any sort of new environment. So an example of one of these temperament traits is how adaptable or flexible your child is. Now, if you have a really adaptable child, just by virtue of their temperament, by lucky dip, then they're more likely to quickly adapt to new situations. They kind of scope it all out. They figure out, all the new things they have to deal with, and they just kind of get on with it a lot more quickly than some of our children will, who, again, just by virtue of their temperament, take a little longer to adapt. They might be a bit slower to warm up in a situation, a bit longer to figure out the newness and to feel comfortable with the newness. There's another temperament trait that we call novelty seeking. Children and adults who are novelty seeking, that just means they seek out newness. They love newness. In fact, they're quite bored without it. They'll often seek out new adventures. And starting in childcare is very much one of those new adventures. So some children will really welcome the newness of starting in childcare or moving rooms within a childcare centre because of their novelty-seeking temperament. Others really prefer same. They find newness really unsettling. And again, it's not that, one's better than the other. The world needs our children to be the fabulously diverse individuals that they are. It just helps, I think, though, to understand why some of our children might take a little longer than others to welcome the idea of attending childcare in the first place, or to, settling into their new routine. It's not that there's anything wrong with our little ones. Our children are exactly who they're meant to be, but it's just that some children will very normally, by virtue of their temperament, take a little longer to adapt, and that's okay. For all of our children, when we're heading into that journey of starting in childcare for the first time, really, and I'll mention this kind of start of things briefly, because I know most of you have already started. But I think it's just helpful to kind of refresh on the kind of things that can help our children, because they're equally relevant when we're changing rooms too. There's a whole lot of newness that comes with changing rooms. So even though I'm going to be talking about the very start of childcare and how we can build familiarity around that, there's a lot of the things that I mentioned that are going to be equally relevant, a month down the track, 2 months down the track, or when they start in a new room later in the year. So firstly, you want to have a look at what orientation opportunities there are. Ideally, you get to stay and visit and play and meet your new educator, the classmates, get a feel for the room, get a feel for the new routine, as often as you need to, actually. You can figure that out with a centre director, how often you might be able to visit ahead of time to be able to build familiarity in your child. We know that children who are more familiar with what they're going into are going to settle more quickly. It makes sense. Just as if we've had a chance to kind of scope out our new workplace, get to know our colleagues, our boss, what kind of work we're going to be doing, the first day jitters are going to be less than if we just kind of rock up and we're landed in it with a whole lot of uncertainty about what's happening to us. It's very much the same for our children. So think really broadly about how you can build that familiarity. Think about, asking questions ahead of time. What do I need to pack? What do I need to bring for my child? Where do we put that? Where do they go to the toilet if your child's toilet trained? Where will they be sleeping? Do you mind if we have a look at that? And hey, gorgeous, do you want to have a little practice sleep here? Because this is where you're going to be sleeping next week. Really try and build that familiarity as much as you can. Learn about the daily routine, what kind of activities your child will be doing, what kind of food they might be eating. Do they need to bring a water bottle, or is water provided? Ask all the questions that they might need to know and need to be familiar with ahead of time to reduce the likelihood of things unexpected popping up for them. Find out from your educator what the best means of communication is with him or her. And really share with your child's educator as much as possible. This equally relates if your child has already started or if your child's moved rooms. What you really want to do is foster this familiar, nurturing relationship between your child and their educator as much as possible and as early as possible. If you have a baby starting in childcare and they know that it's nap time because you sing them a certain song. If you sing them Twinkle, Twinkle as you're heading towards bed, let your educator know that so that they can do the same. Do they need a particular blanket or a dummy to sleep with? Are there particular foods that they absolutely detest that will be awful if they cop them on the first day? Are there situations they particularly find challenging? Do they have any developmental challenges, for example, relating to their speech or their motor development, social skills, anything you want to kind of flag with their educator so that they can be alert to your child's needs and how best to help them in those days to weeks as they're settling in. The next thing is to really embrace your new village. They say it takes a village, and you've all landed in a fabulous one. Your educator should be an extension of your village. They are someone that you want your child to develop a really close relationship with. I know I speak with some parents sometimes that are reluctant for their child to have too close a relationship with their educator because, they feel jealous. They don't want to be trumped as number one. You won't be. I promise you won't be. You will always be the most important person in the universe in the eyes of your child. But children actually benefit when they have more than one fabulous close relationship. And in fact, if they can have a few, and your educator can serve that need in your child beautifully. It also really helps if your child has a close relationship with their educator, then moving into their care in the morning is a much easier transition than if they're moving into the care of someone unfamiliar or someone that they simply don't know or trust or feel safe with. It's really important that your child loves your educator and sees your educator as someone who loves them too, who sees the best in them. One thing I often recommend when you're first starting out in childcare is to perhaps ask your child's educator if they'd mind if you took a photo of your child and their educator together and you popped it on the fridge at home, because they will become, if they haven't already, an extension of your family. And it's nice to have their face in your family home and someone that your child can associate as being a part of their family, someone who's, one of their important grown-ups who has their back. And make sure you always speak really positively about the centre, about their classmates, about their educator. Be really careful not to be critical of their new environment or their teacher within earshot of your child, because they know you know far more than they do. And if they pick up that they might be going into an unsafe or an anxiety-provoking situation, or even a not ideal situation, that will absolutely affect how settled your child feels in these initial stages. Lots of talk is what I've written on this slide. Children understand language long before they can use it themselves. So even if you have an infant starting in childcare for the first time, talk to them loads about what's happening, about the people in their classmates in their centre, what their teacher's name is, some of the activities they might be doing, what the weather's going to be like today. Talk about all of it, what kind of food they might try. We know that children benefit from hearing a lot of vocab, a lot of language. So it not only benefits their language skills, but if they're exposed to you having positive conversations about this new experience and encouraging them and reassuring them and letting them know many of the fabulous things that lie ahead for them, that's very much reassuring for our children too. The other way you can build familiarity, and this is whether your child started or not, it's equally helpful if your child's already started, is to play childcare at home with your child. You can either use play characters, you might have some, dolls you can use at home, or if you don't have any dolls, you can make some with your child. You don't need to spend any money at all. You can just grab some, old toilet rolls and draw some faces on and pop some cotton balls on top and, draw some clothes on them. It can be it doesn't matter what they look like. It's just about the experience, the practicing that children get through play, building familiarity through play. We know that children learn through play. So if we can play out new situations, children really benefit from that. It's like they're practicing in real time and building their confidence and building their sense of mastery, that they are familiar and can manage in that particular situation. So for an example, if you had a child who, based on the last couple of weeks, is finding saying goodbye to you really tricky in the morning, you could practice your goodbyes with some toy characters. So you could grab 3 toy characters, one who's you, one who's your child, one who's the educator, and you can practice with your child, and you can say something like, I've noticed that goodbyes are really tricky in the morning. Hey, I know, I understand. How about we have a practice of what we can do tomorrow so that it feels better for you? So we both know what to expect and we both know what to do as you start to become a bit more familiar with how we say goodbye. I know it's new, so let's have a practice. And it might be that, you both have a hug, and then your child who's feeling a little bit sad has a hug with their educator, and you say goodbye, and your child sticks with the educator toy, and off you go, and the child can stick with that educator toy until they're feeling better, for example. Role plays are great too. If there's any situation that your child is feeling challenged by, and this could be really broad, it could be asking other children if they can join in their play. It could be asking a teacher for help. It could be finding out if they're allowed to go to the toilet, or asking when it might be outside playtime, or putting their shoes on and off, opening up their water bottle and refilling it. There's all sorts of situations that a child might find challenging or new. Might be physical, social, there's all sorts of tasks that your child will be faced with day in, day out, and they get better with practice. You know, we know children learn through practice, they learn through play, so you can practice any of these tasks that your child might find tricky. It might even be resting or sleeping in an unfamiliar environment. You might have a practice of that together. And ideally, you seek your child's input on this. So you say, okay, well, it sounds like it's felt pretty strange sleeping there at childcare, because usually you're used to sleeping in your own bed. So how about we have a practice, since it's not a childcare day today, sleeping somewhere a bit funny. Where do you think we should sleep? Do you want to sleep in the bathroom? Do you want to sleep in the study? What sort of funny place do you want to practice sleeping in today? And it might be that you just practice it. You don't actually go to sleep there. Or it might be your child actually wants to kind of feel like they can conquer that in their safe environment of home, so that it is a little easier when they get there. But just have a think really broadly about situations your child might find difficult or challenging, and work with them if they're old enough to be able to practice that and build their sense of mastery as these tasks become a little easier. Consider, of course, if there are any special toys or blankets or comforters that they'd like to take. I remember when one of my children she was probably preschool, so she was probably a little bit older when she went through a little bit of a tricky patch in her centre. And for a little while there, I'd said to her, do you want to, I know you find it a little bit hard to be away from our family at the moment during the day. Would it help if you took a little bit of, something special from me, if I gave you one of my special necklaces to wear under your clothes, under your shirt during the day? And that was something that she could kind of just connect with during the day and feel that sense of connection with family, even while she was away from us. Necklaces aren't always appropriate, obviously, if your child is very little, or you worry they might hurt themselves. But there'll be all sorts of other items that are special to your child that might just help bridge that gap between home and centre as they're settling in. Picture books are great too. Children learn a lot from picture books. And this, again, from a very early age, you can absolutely use these with infants as well. Often when they're reading a picture book, or being read to, obviously, a picture book that relates to a situation they're in, it provides children with that sense of comfort that they're not the first to face this challenge, and it's entirely normal and reasonable to feel challenged by this situation. And often these picture books provide a couple of strategies or solutions that have helped the main character that your child might be able to relate to too. There's a site that I often refer to, a website called littleparachutes.com, that you're welcome to look up. I'm not related to it in any way, but there is, my understanding is there's a lady who runs that, who files all sorts of picture books that are already in existence under various themes. So you can look up all sorts of themes there. It might be starting in childcare, starting big school, going to hospital, death in the family, all sorts of topics. And she's filed a few of the picture books that she can find that fit that topic under that heading. And what I've done before with my own children is I've just looked up a heading of a particular topic that I think they might need a bit more conversation or input around, and I've looked up those particular suggestions at the local library, got those out, had a quick look at them, and then shared any that I think might be helpful with my children. So it's worth looking at if your child is yet to start or has recently started and they're finding it a little bit tricky and you're just looking for extra resources to help at home. Now, how your child settles in is influenced by several factors. I have mentioned temperament because I think that's helpful to mention from the get-go. But really, there's so many other factors at play, whether they've had an older sibling, for example, attend childcare. If you've had a child, like, for example, my third child, who essentially grew up attending his older sibling's preschool centre from the day he was born, it was very familiar to him when he started. He knew the teachers. He knew many of the children. Because they'd been younger siblings of, again, some of the older children who'd been in his sister's classes. He knew the environment. He'd played in that playground while he waited for his sisters. That can certainly play a difference, make a difference. how prone they are to worries. We know that some children are more prone to anxiety, to feeling nervous, to feeling a bit overwhelmed by situations or taking a bit longer to adapt to situations. And of course, that might play into how settled or unsettled your child might be feeling at the moment. How frequently they attend childcare. It would be natural to assume that if your child attended childcare quite regularly, then they will probably settle into the environment and the routine more quickly than someone who attends once a week, for example, because of that exposure that they're getting. Family factors come into play. Sometimes it's not about our child at all or about the centre. Sometimes it's about the fact that we've just had a new baby at home, or someone in the family is really sick, or we've just moved house and it's nothing's unpacked and home feels a bit frantic. There's all sorts of factors that can affect how settled our children feel. And sometimes we have to think a little bit more broadly to see what those factors are and to see how we might be able to help. And of course, how well we're coping comes into it as well. If you are feeling rotten about the fact that you are taking your child to childcare or that your child's had to go to childcare in your mind, that's naturally, if you're feeling awful every time you're going there, your child will pick up on that and they will very quickly sense that they're being sent to an awful place or that it's awful that they have to go here. They are amazing at picking up on how we're feeling. So we've got to be really careful that we are providing our children with the right emotional tone to help them settle in. Children are barometers of household tension, they say. When we're stressed, they pick it up. They feel stressed. And we see that played out in their behaviour and how quickly they settle into new situations. Honestly, there's no need for you to feel guilty about your child being in childcare. I know many of you aren't feeling guilty, but some of you will be, and you needn't be. We know that children benefit from high quality early childhood education. The research is really robust around that, particularly for the age of 3 and 4 year olds. But we need to think a bit more broadly too. If you didn't, for those of you who are feeling guilty about this and wish you weren't in this situation, you need to think about what the alternative is. And if that means a loss of income in this crazy financial climate at the moment, that might well not be doing your child any favours either. We are all doing our best. And choosing a high quality centre as you have to send your child to develop a relationship with someone who will nurture them and provide them with amazing experiences, honestly, you needn't feel bad about that. Quite the opposite. If your child is feeling unsettled, you might notice that they're reluctant to attend, that they really don't want to go to childcare, that they're asking as soon as they wake up in the morning, is today a childcare day? Is it not? They're asking the night before just so they can kind of get the lay of the land for how they're going to feel in the morning. Goodbyes can obviously be quite tearful when they're yet to settle. And changes in their sleeping habits are really common. When I first went back to work, when my oldest child was around the age of 1, might have been 11 months or so, she always used to wake up at 5 a.m. anyway, like on the dot. It wouldn't be 5:01, it wouldn't be 4:59, it was 5:00 she would wake up. I could practically count it down to the second. But as soon as I went back to work, she started waking up at 4 to bank some extra time with me before my day started and before I had to go to work. One of my other children were in the same situation when I went back to work after I had her. She used to stay awake and avoid napping on my days at home with her, again, so she could kind of bank some more time, but it meant that she was dead tired and the late afternoons are a real struggle. You might find that your child wants to sleep in bed with you again, or that they're not sleeping as well, or that they've kind of regressed in their sleeping and they're waking at night when they'd stopped doing that. And all of those things are normal. You might find changes in their behaviour. You might find that they're quick to lose it. You might find that they're losing it as soon as they get in the car in the afternoon. I remember a couple of times having to pull over halfway down the street after I'd picked up my child We didn't even get off the same street that the centre was on. And it was just that they'd taken so much in the day and felt so overwhelmed by all the newness that, yeah, she needed to kind of release that a bit and regroup in our, you know, comforting arms, I guess. So I would just pull over, jump in the back with her and give her a cuddle. And I think just acknowledging that all of that is normal, it helps reassure us. And it won't last either, by the way. You might also find that your child's a lot more clingy just because they're dealing with a new situation and you are their go-to person when they're struggling. I'm just going to go through a few tips now for the next few pages. Have a think about, some of these might be relevant, some of them may not. One of the things that I found really helpful, and that you might as well, is consider, if you can, preparing for your evenings in advance. And I know that's easier said than done, because you might well have to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning to do that. But it's really hard on our children when they have just started in childcare or they've just transitioned into a new room and the newness is overwhelming them. When we kind of dash home at the end of the day, which we know is a possibly rotten time of the day anyway, we get straight into preparing dinner and there's no time for connection. We actually just need to provide some sort of gap, and it doesn't need to be huge, but our children do need us to stop and be mentally present and just be there for them for a bit and provide the comfort they need, or to have a laugh and a quick play with them if that's what they need from us, and just allow them to kind of fill their tank again so that they feel okay before the evening progresses. What we tend to find, if you just jump straight into, you know, work emails or cooking dinner or whatever tasks lie ahead of you at the end of the night, and our child's running on empty still, is that the nights tend to go they're pretty ordinary. Your child kind of never gets to regroup and the nights can be pretty tricky. It is worth, if you can, you know, even getting up in the morning 10 minutes earlier and just chopping the veggies for the night's dinner, just so you don't have to do that bit. Or getting any of the, you know, prep work with the sharp knives out of the way so that your child can perhaps just sit on the bench beside you. And you can have a chat while you do whatever else you need to do for meal prep at night. Make sure they get lots of sleep. They will be utterly exhausted when they first start, and it's really tempting when we do know that we want to regroup with them and reconnect to kind of keep them up a little bit later and make sure we still get in lots of play. But our children actually really need to sleep as well. It's really important. We can't expect them to handle as much as they're handling in terms of all this newness while sleep deprived. That's not going to set them up for success. Try to keep things as predictable as you can. If you have normal routines, like you have dinner and then bath and then bedtime, stick with that same routine. Or you always read a bedtime story before bed, stick with that routine. Whatever your normal, you know, Tuesday night meal is, if that's a thing in your house, stick with your normal Tuesday night meal. It's not the time to start mixing things up a bit, because there's safety in predictability. When children know what's coming, what's going to happen next, their systems can kind of relax. And it's really important we provide that at home, because they're not yet experiencing that through the rest of their day. So try and keep the rest of their routine, the rest of their day, the rest of their evening routine as predictable as normal. And try, if you can, to avoid any major big changes at the same time. Now, that's easier said than done if you are, you know, currently 9 months pregnant, obviously, or if you've had to move house. You know, there's all sorts of things that, you know, life throws our way. We can't always pick the timing of things, but if you do have a choice in whether to embark on a major renovation of your house, for example, maybe just leave it a couple of months. Maybe just try to reduce the big changes to, you know, one at a time, if you're in the position to be able to do that. And allow plenty of time to get ready in the mornings. It's really tricky when I've just finished saying make sure your child gets plenty of sleep, but if you also don't allow enough time in the mornings, then the mornings are frantic and they're rushed and they're stressed, and that can kind of set the tone for your child's drop off. So just having a think about how you structure your day, how you accommodate your child's need for predictability and for connection. There's some main tips to consider. Also anticipate upsets and regression. Your child is going to have more meltdowns at the moment. They're just taking on so much, and until they build up a relationship with their educator, their kind of go-to release person that they're going to seek out for comfort is still going to be you. So they might have to hold in an awful lot during the day until they get to see you. Regression, I mentioned, can occur with sleep, but it can also occur with toileting. If you've got a previously toilet-trained toddler who you successfully toilet-trained a couple of months ago and now they've gone backwards, know that that's normal. These things, they will come back. It's just normal for them to kind of take one step backwards before they move forwards again when big changes are happening for them. Consider requesting a copy of the daily routine if they're yet to settle and you're thinking about how I can help them. You might say to your child's educator, you know, my little one's getting used to all the newness and getting used to all the new activities through the day. Is it possible to get a printout of the routine that I've seen you pop up on the wall so that we can maybe pop that on our fridge too, so that we know what, you know, if there is a predictable routine that happens on the Tuesdays and Thursdays that your child is there, for example, can we pop those routines up in the bottom of the fridge there on the fridge door so your child can become more familiar with them more quickly as well. And you might find that that's helpful to structure some of your practice or your play around too. You can play out what some of those activities look like and how they know to move in from one room to the next and what they have to do before mealtime if there's particular steps they need to take. Again, just speeding up that familiarity building process. And certainly encourage their new relationships. If there are new classmates, new people to meet, and you have an opportunity to also connect with those people at the park for a park play on the weekend, or to invite them around for a play, any particular friends they've connected with, that will naturally strengthen those relationships more quickly. Please know that newness takes time to get used to. You're looking at least 6 weeks. I would normally say 6 to 8 weeks until things feel less new. And I'm sure you can relate to that yourself. You know, after we've had a baby or we've started in a new workplace ourselves, often it's that 6 to 8 week mark where things start to feel a bit more familiar. I remember when all of my children started school for the first time at their school, they would celebrate, I know it's a little bit older, when they were 5, their first year of school used to celebrate the first 100 days, because they would find that it would take about 100 days for children to be used to being at school and for that to become their new normal. So they would have a big countdown calendar and then they would have a 100 days party when they'd hit that 100-day mark. But it's certainly, you know, it can take a while and that's okay. But in the meantime, be sure to keep your own emotions in check. If you're hitting that 3 to 4 week mark and you're thinking, oh my goodness, why are they so unsettled still? And why are our evenings still feeling so tricky? Or when are they going to start sleeping back in their own bed again? Whatever it might be, just know that it's normal for that newness to take a while to adapt to. And as I say, for a benchmark figure, 6 to 8 weeks is often considered very normal. I'm just going to talk you through an example here if your child does struggle specifically with drop-offs. And some of you will have heard me walk through this example before, because I think it's helpful to know what to do in this particular situation. If you have a little one that's really tearful at goodbye time, we can be really uncertain about how to manage that. You know, do we try and leg it when they're not looking, or do we try to distract them with an activity that they like to do? You know, what do we do? Or do we stay and risk being late for work? I just want to walk you through the most helpful approach to take in this particular situation. What I'd suggest is that you acknowledge for your child how they're feeling and you provide them with comfort, and then effectively pass them on to their person who's going to be their comforter during the day. And in doing so, you signal to them, I trust your go-to person to provide you with comfort. Our approach will be the same. It will be consistent. They are your safe go-to person through the day. And I understand, and together we're a team. We've got this. So what I'd suggest you do is to pick up your little one, a sad look on your face, which mirrors his. I've said his because the example is for a boy, but obviously the same goes if you have a daughter. And by doing that, even if you've got a very young infant, you still show them using your facial expression that you understand what's happening for them, which in and of itself is a containing experience for our children. And you say in a soothing voice, I know you're feeling sad, I have to go. Your teacher will keep you safe until I get back. Let's have a big cuddle, and then your teacher can give you a cuddle too after I've gone. And then your child's educator literally steps in where you've left off and does the same. Says, you're sad that mummy or daddy has left. You wish you could stay with mummy or daddy. I understand. I'll keep you safe until he or she comes back later. How about we stick together until you're feeling better and ready to play?